Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast, and it is my pleasure today to be joined by Shannon Russo. Shannon, I'm going to guess that a lot of our audience probably aren't aware of you or your business. So, because as you know, as our preamble before we kind of got going, I was explaining a little bit about kind of the audiences of the podcast, and we are a majority kind of UK kind of focus. We have a bit of representation in the US and other world, but as a US business and a US business owner and a US business person, it would be great if Shannon, you could give us a little bit about your kind of background, your journey in the HR and recruitment space, or staffing, as it's sometimes kind of described over in the US, and of what you do today, and a little bit about your business.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on this morning. I really appreciate it, James. So I actually have been in the business for longer than I care to. I'd belie my age if I keep going, but for a very long time, suffice to say. And I did start out at a staffing company that was endeavoring to form their way into being a full service kind of workforce solutions company. That's the way they tagged it. So that would include staffing. It also included where I am today, which is RPO, and I'll come back to that, and also included consulting, but it was really this kind of full range, right? Perm, direct hire, contract, right? Everything in between. And they were trying to kind of build this holistic model. So I spent, prior to the 16, 17 years at Kinetix, doing that. And so really got to see a lot of different views on a global scale. So we were a global business. So it was really good to see that. And then I decided to, you could say I kind of took my marbles and went home a little bit, but I actually liquidated all of my retirement and formed the business that we're talking about today, Kinetix, by putting three little teeny recruitment and staffing businesses together back at the end of 2004 to form Kinetix, but with a vision that is the same vision. And that was to be an RPO business, a recruitment process outsourcing business, as the primary focus of the business, with a little bit kind of on the periphery, but really focused on that. And my reason for that was, while we did tons of work in staffing and recruiting in a lot of those sections, what I perceived was that clients, and certainly hiring managers, we didn't really impact their process. We didn't help them get better. We were better in order for them to get candidates more quickly, if that makes sense. And we got better and better at those kinds of things, but they never got better. And I saw recruitment outsourcing as a way to really help our clients get better, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And RPO, I mean, you obviously, when you started in 2004, you were probably kind of at the leading edge of that now. And it's now much more of a term that we're used to using. Obviously, there are kind of some businesses who kind of love it, some businesses that hate it, some businesses feel it's a bit of a threat, some businesses don't kind of want to touch it with a barge pole. You know, how do you see the kind of the RPO business as it sits in kind of 2022?
Yeah, that's a great question, because RPO, as you articulated, really seems to mean so many things to so many people. We have seen it be everything from recruiting staffing, meaning I'm staffing recruiters and I charge you by the hour or week or something like that, and that's called RPO, to bulk direct hire purchasing, right? That's actually in some ways a little closer, and then everything in between that is called RPO. Our definition, our traditional definition of recruitment outsourcing is we take a candidate from the very beginning, in some cases, the very top of the funnel awareness, right? All the way through what I would call all the stages of the funnel to onboarding, and where we stop in onboarding. So not just sourcing, screening, selecting, right? Interviews with hiring leaders, calibration, offer, all the way to onboarding. So we do that entire process as our clients. So the candidate does not know that it's Kinetix.
Yeah.
The candidate it's very transparent to them. We hand off in onboarding to different parts of HR. We're handing off to our HR partners, right? So it's a full process. Whereas, like on a traditional search, I might find, screen, throw them over the fence, right? We're on the other side all the way through as the client. So that's our definition. And
Yeah.
how that might be different than those other ones that I mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is. I think the term RPO is a bit of a catch-all term and has become a bit muddied over the years. I know RPO businesses that select parts of that process that we just discussed, and they call that RPO. There are other businesses that only really want to work with the recruitment agencies and kind of take over doing part of their business. It sounds like in your business you actually work with. Do you work with a client directly, or do you work with agencies as well?
No, we work with the client directly, and we are representing it. We have their email address. We are in their applicant tracking
Right.
system because we are helping them to get better, right? So we are putting more candidates into their database. We are trying to add processes to their database because typically they didn't have a lot of those metrics in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to make them better really across all the stages. And you're right. There's actually a lot of people who do sourcing, and maybe they look at them, they give them a smell test, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's called RPO. And then they deliver them to recruiters that are at the client, if that makes sense, or at the agency. And
Yeah.
that is not what we do. We jokingly call that faux PO because that's sort of important stuff, though. Important, right? In that it's sourcing and getting into the top of the funnel from a recruiting standpoint, but not RPO. Not RPO.
Yeah, I mean, you articulate it very well there, kind of all the kind of the differences, and yeah, with regards to the clients you work with, do they typically have someone like an in-house recruiter or an HR team, kind of that you work with directly? Do you tend to just kind of take over that entire function? So, like a smaller business might not have none of that, and they're just going to go, Shannon, we just have no idea how to kind of recruit. This is all on you.
Yes. So it depends, is what I would say. However, we're taking a part of the process. We for Kinetix, which is different than some of the big global RPOs.
Yeah.
We are not trying to take over your entire process unless that's something that you want, and that's not often what people want. So you might even call us hybrid, in that typically if you're small, you may say you just take it all. We just had a client that's actually global, but in the US, they're like, we have 1.5 recruiters and they're on a contract basis. Can you just do all of these recs?
Mhm.
Yes, we can, but that's not typically what we're trying to do. If you're a larger enterprise, have a larger footprint of how much you need to hire, we might be part of your team. Typically, the hardest skills. And by the way, if that were me, that's what I would do. I would hire us to do the hardest stuff and then let my recruitment team do the other skill sets. And everyone knows, if they know anything about recruiting, that you kind of have this spectrum of what you need as a business. And so I would segment those out and sort of just do those. But then we're bringing some of these best practices to your team, with your team. We're on the team.
Yeah.
And so there's some real leverage that we find there, where we can kind of share with each other, talk about sourcing tools that we are using, talk about the things that we are doing in the process, reporting, align the reporting so everybody's getting tracked on the same thing. Typically, when that happens, we have a client right now that is doing that because their recruiters never did reporting, right? And not their fault. They didn't have kind of the focus that we do. And so we're becoming that template, if that makes sense. And so again, we're helping them.
Yeah. So let's get on to kind of really what we were going to discuss there, and we've touched on it a little bit there, but it's supporting clients kind of with that recruitment process, and and if we put it into a form that everyone will recognize, which is the funnel. Everyone out there listening will be aware of sales funnels and marketing funnels. But if we put the recruitment process into a funnel as well, it quite neatly fits into that, right? You've kind of got awareness, consideration, and purchase, however you want to kind of kind of change those terms. But talk us through this. So let's start kind of at the top of the funnel. How do you, from your, what's your insight in how to kind of to kick off the process?
That's a great way to frame it. We talk consistently about the funnel. And so that top awareness, really very important for clients. And people are starting to pay a lot more attention to it, but they don't always think about it the way that I would say people on our side of the fence tend to think about it. Because what's important about that funnel and your employer brand per se, right? So part of awareness is employer brand, part of it is marketing the jobs, right? You can actually separate those two, but unless you're Uber, or maybe not Uber anymore, but unless you are Google or Facebook or Apple or, a very small list of companies, even if you have a well-known brand on your business, improving your employer brand is of critical importance. And so that top part of the funnel really is important. And our focus from there is really about telling stories about what it's like to work at your business. What is going to, and with a singular focus, which is selling me without being salesy, by exposing me, because most of the time those stories don't get told. So the way we think about it is telling those stories really is selling, because if I'm a person that's into whatever it is that you do, I'm going to be excited by seeing what that is and how I could fit into that. And so we're big fans at that top part of the funnel in really telling stories with a focus on what you do and the kinds of positions, so that I can get a real vision of what it could be to work there. There obviously is we're a great place to work and all of that that's table stakes. Mm-hmm. These stories are sort of that next level view of that very top of the funnel. Does that make sense?
No, completely. And again, prior to us kind of to start recording, we were talking about the kind of other touch points, right? You've kind of got at that stage. So, employer branding, that's very much, the hub of that would be on your kind of website, your career site. But there's a lot more kind of going on in the outside world. And these we always talk about these 7 touch points. And like you, it was like, I'm not. I think that's slightly apocryphal. I don't know how accurate that actually is. But let's just say there's more than one touch point. So,
yes,
how do we kind of then move that beyond the career site and spread that awareness?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the second part of that, right? If you have the top part being that awareness, that second part is literally the outreach part, and a variety of models to do that, right? People talk a lot about social, and we leverage social a lot. Really kind of sprinkling your information of what you do have available out there in a variety of forms, because it could be just part of that story. If you want to learn more, come here, right? So it doesn't just have to be, I pushed my postings out everywhere, but it really is doing that. And then the second part is, I need to find you. That's a significant change from decades ago when everything was just getting people to come over the transom. Now, specifically in the harder skill sets, right? So in the healthcare space, that would be nursing. In the technology space, that would be cyber security, or development has always been part of the stuff. Those are the kinds of things that you really need to flip it around, and I need to come after you and try to expose you. I need to go where you live, groups or those types of things, and I need to expose you and or ping you directly. So big change there in that sort of top, in much more of a focus, instead of just coming over the transom, just pulling, right, fishing, if you will. We've got to actually go spearfishing and come after you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So from a marketing perspective, we're talking about a little bit of kind of outbound marketing, a little bit of inbound marketing, basically.
That's right.
Where the end, the goal is really to get people to come to us. That's what we're trying to do so well with our awareness campaigns. But as you said, trying to pinpoint those specific kind of hard to find candidates who probably aren't going to come to you directly. Okay, so that's the kind of that's building out our awareness. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, so a lot of times you could have really good stuff that there at the top, and then they come to a terrible career site. It takes 45 minutes for me to get through your application. Oh, please do not do that. Please do not do that. And I really make it hard for you to get to the next step. So we would say, make it simple, however you want to do it. Make it where I can just upload my resume, done. Somebody's going to contact me, and you're not a black hole, right? So that very top part, this is where the kind of where we spend a significant amount of our time, because that's where the touch starts to happen, right? So if you come in, however you come in, if I've reached out directly to you, or if I've done any of the things to kind of bring you to me, I need to react immediately and try to move you into my process as quickly as possible. So black holes can no longer be part of the recruitment process. And I think you know what I mean by that, which is I apply to you, I come to one of your things, and you do not respond to me at all. That's a complete fail.
And what about if you are in a space that you either are, you're very lucky, you're kind of swamped with candidates, or you get a lot of kind of candidates, maybe inappropriate candidates, kind of applying. How do you deal with volume in that situation?
Fortunately and unfortunately, it's doing the work, right? People are like, AI can really help you. It can, but if I don't know what the hiring leader truly needs beyond the job description, so AI can do a great job of getting you to the basics of what I'll call minimum qualifications, right? Where they have some of the things, but you have to connect the dots with that specific function in that specific company and trying to make it. And that's where the magic happens when people say, oh, recruitment's going away, we're just going to do it all with machines. Not really, because you have people on the other end, and you really got to make that connection. So the screening is more than just the minimum quals. Those are important, right? But you're going to be screening, and you're also selling them on why they might be a good fit for this opportunity. So that from us, the sales to a candidate to help them really understand why they might be fit, assuming that they are. And by the way, as important, if they are not a fit, I should say, hey, James, it's been great chatting with you. Probably not a good fit, so we're not going to be moving forward. I really appreciate it. I wish you the best. If there's any way that I can help you.
Yeah.
Close it out. That's a big that's another miss, right? The black hole's one, that's another piece.
Yeah, I tend to think that's actually just as important as the people who kind of get through to the next stage. Is kind of creating that atmosphere of kind of authenticity and trust by the way you deal with the people that don't make it to the next stage, as well as the people that make it who do make it to the next stage. I think that's just as important. And it's interesting you kind of touched on technology there, but the recruitment process now is, there's probably a bit of tech that will manage most of it. Okay. And so where do your kind of thoughts sit on the kind of changing role of the recruiter in this new kind of recruitment process? Is it much more, as a lot of kind of leading thinkers think, it's much more around down to those kind of soft skills and being that kind of and freeing up this person to do more time by having, automating either side of what they kind of do? Or, should they be much more involved with the entire process?
Yes. Well, what I would say is this. I could answer that both ways, truly, by the way, because I have some recruiters that really understand, and they can kind of dive into the sourcing part and really make whatever AI that we are using. And there's such a variety today that we're diving into, and we continue to dive into kind of testing it out, right? And figuring out, excuse me, what some of the best ways are. But some of my recruiters are really good at that, and some of them are not. And so as you think about that, there can be a place, but it's not an all or nothing, and you shouldn't have all your people do that. I'll give you an example. When we get clients for smaller, well, actually for all of them, but for the smaller ones, it's really apparent. We will rewrite their job descriptions. And let me be clear, I do not have recruiters doing that. You know why? Because they are terrible at it. Some of them could be passable, but not. And so what I would say is, right, we're an outsourcing business. By the way, outsource what you can. Outsource what you are not better at. And so if you think about it from a technology standpoint and a recruiting process, it really would be do the things where you can have the most impact on the process, not the easiest, if that makes sense. And if there are repetitive things that you can do, you talked about where you had tons and tons of candidates coming over the transom. I think there's a lot of people saying, where can I have those jobs? Right? Where are those? But here's what I would tell you. You mentioned it. If I'm not doing a good job of dispositioning, that's a word that we use a lot, but of dispositioning those candidates, or really kind of sending them on their way. Hey, I'm moving you through the process, or as importantly, hey, this maybe isn't the right fit. We've gone in a different direction. We've already filled the position. Whatever the reason is, doesn't matter. That I'm communicating with you. Excuse me.
Just for everybody listening, that's Shannon. I believe probably getting a little squeaky toy off of a pet of some kind. That sounds what it sounds like.
I'm so sorry.
It's all right. As you know, as a dog owner myself, I've been interrupted on numerous occasions by someone kind of, either kind of wanting attention or playing with toys next to us. So not a problem. So
My apologies.
That's not a problem. We were just kind of finishing up on talking around the kind of the soft skills that a recruiter needs, and the kind of the technical skills they may or may not have, and how they kind of deploy those, and how they use those when within the recruitment kind of process.
Yes. So some of the recruiters are really better at doing some of those things, and those we would put on some teams to kind of leverage across all of our skill sets. But some of them are not as good, and they're really just better at certain parts of the process, talking to candidates, right? Screening them, that kind of stuff. And so we don't blame you if that's not who you are, right? We just align what we're doing so that you're being utilized the best. All of our recruiters are doing the screening, the last part of the sourcing. So I've got my candidates in the pool, if you will, and I'm going through those candidates and figuring it out, and I'm dispositioning them both ways. And then the ones that I think are the best, I'm screening, and if I still think they're the best, I am submitting them. So we do what we call a submittal process, where we would write up a little bit on our notes, what we like about the candidate, that kind of stuff. And then we'd pass them on to a hiring leader. And then we're going to work with that hiring leader to decide, are they going to interview all of those people? Are they going to only interview some of them? Get that scheduled, and then calibrate afterwards to figure out who gets moved forward. If it's a multi-process, although today we would recommend less steps in your process. We'll talk about speed, I'm sure, at some point, and moving them through the process.
Yeah. Give us a little bit of a kind of insight into how that kind of how the interview process is now working in the US, because obviously with our UK audiences, we're very much now working a little bit of face to face, but also a lot online. Those kind of and which has had numerous kinds of effects. A slight kind of democratization of where people can live and work, and that. How is that? What's that like in the US now? I mean, is that kind of a similar kind of situation?
I would say that it is a similar kind of situation, and that is, we had clients we were trying for years to do video interviews, and all of a sudden, now everyone is comfortable doing video interviews. We would tell you we think that has helped in some cases, because we can get that initial face-to-face done more quickly. In other cases where the end result is going to be face-to-face, sometimes we feel like people are putting extra steps in. So that's the only other caveat that I will tell you is, now because what you and I are doing is easier, people just say, well, that's always the way. Well, if the ultimate job is sitting with a team and being face-to-face, you still need to do that. And so in those cases, we would actually coach, because speed has become the other moniker, at least in the United States. You've got to make your process as effective as possible. And we mean faster while still getting what you need out of that process. So we would say that don't have extra video interview steps, even though it's a great way to do a first interview if that's how you do it, if you don't need them. Because what we would tell you is, we do video interviews, but we'll hire you this way. If that's the case, Bob's your uncle, you are set, if you will. Do that as your face-to-face, and you don't have, it's much more, it's much simpler. Well, simple is not the right word, but it's much more effective. You can schedule these much more quickly when people have the time now. So we would say that is the case. The only thing is, we have seen people say, well, I'll do a video interview, and then I'll do a face-to-face, and then I'll do a panel interview. We're like, oh no, we need less, not more. So faster process.
And does that speed come through? Is that basically driven by the lack of candidates and a candidate shortage, and wanting to get to candidates faster than potentially a competitor or someone else, or being instead of get them being offered your job as opposed to quicker than they can be offered someone else's job?
I think, James, I think it's both, really. It actually is that, generically, the expectation is that dragging a process on means you are not interested. And then I, as a candidate, I'm going to be interested somewhere else, whether it's a tight candidate market or not, but it is doubled down now. But the second part, I think that really is a change, is that all of us, you and I included, have much more of an expectation of things happening faster. We get annoyed if our phone does not kind of run as fast as we want it to. So if you translate that into the recruitment process, the base expectation is that things should happen more quickly, that the process should be more efficient. And so I think it's that, as well as the fact that you are absolutely right. If you don't move quickly, right? Early in my recruitment days, I used to hear time kills all deals. It still does. Now, maybe even more than ever. And because I have so much access and people have so much access to me, that could change during the process, right? So whereas you used to think you could, once I had you, if you and I were talking, that was it. But that's not the case, because you can go on Facebook tonight and be pinged for an opportunity, or any of the places that you might visit. And so speed also matters, because I need to stay connected with you and get you to the finish line. So it really is a little bit of both, and that baseline expectation in that it shouldn't take as long, right?
Yeah.
Things don't take.
And let's kind of move towards the bottom of the kind of recruitment process funnel, and tell me a little bit more about kind of onboarding, right? Because let's assume we've gone through awareness, we've gone through kind of getting people to kind of apply. They've had the job offer. Now, you've mentioned very on in the way that you kind of offer RPO, is that onboarding and that kind of continued touch points with these placements is something that you kind of do as well. So talk me around that.
Yes. So we stop in the onboarding process really wherever our clients want us to. But I would tell you that, and especially for folks that are in the recruitment business or that kind of stuff, where they're really at the very beginning part, or the first half, let's say, that helping your clients get more effective at the last half. So in the United States, it's things like doing background checks, drug tests, right? That is also the case overseas. That can't take forever. You have to continue to communicate to a candidate. And so that's where we play a lot of role, right? I've offered you the job. If it takes 3 weeks for the offer letter versus the us having a verbal, it's almost a non-starter. We had seen clients losing a huge percentage of their candidates right here. You did all this work to get them all the way to the finish line. They said yes, and then you dropped them, and you just put them in this grinder for the next some period of time. And so even before that, right, this getting to the finish line, right, you've accepted the offer verbally, but I haven't given you your offer letter signed. In the US, that's a pretty important piece, right? And I haven't gotten your background check done, and our offer is contingent on background, right? So if you're that person, I'm still not sure I'm at the finish line, right? Because if it's contingent on a background check, I want to make sure everything's going to go good. And so the effectiveness needs to follow through to those early stages. And then we would say, today, more than ever, now you need to start connecting me with my team, connecting me with that, right? Pull me in, continue to pull me in to get me all the way to the finish line to when I'm going to start.
Yeah. Shannon, it's been an absolute kind of pleasure talking to you today, and it's been fascinating hearing kind of your insights into kind of how to kind of build an effective kind of recruitment process and moving people down that kind of funnel. But for now, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.